So, I would like to welcome you, and I would like to say thank you for being here, because when you do a presentation, it is always good to have someone to listen to it. And yeah, I feel like you would do so. My name is Saskia. I'm a research assistant at a German university. I'm a psychologist, and I am a trained systemic therapist. And the reason why I'm telling you that is that it's got something to do with how that research question that I'm going to talk to you today did arise, actually. Because as a systemic therapist, I am very used to seeing any problems or phenomena that do arise within the context in which they occur. And it is very easy, and it is very near the thought of bringing that way of thinking into bullying research. I'm sure you're all familiar with that idea, because bullying, of course, does not occur between two people and it's just there like in the blink of an eye, but it is something that occurs within the reason of individual classroom-related and school-related factors. And this is actually what I'm trying to talk about, and we are talking about actually two factors: the class-related factor of class climate and the school-related factor of communication climate, or better to say, the way that teachers within staff do talk to each other and do communicate with each other. All right. So the background is known to all of you. We all know that bullying is a prevalent behavior. It is got something to do with aggression, and we have severe negative social and health consequences. The second thing is something that I already said. It is occurring in individual class-related and school-related factors. And we know that there is a special role of teachers. We know that there is a special role of the way that teachers act in relation to their pupils, in which they behave in the classroom. And if you want to put that into a theory, you are very fast with the ecological model by Brandenburg. I'm sure you've already heard that during the past 2 days quite often, because it is, a model that fits that thing very well. Yet, that model often is used in reviews, for example, to give the studies that they review a theoretical background. But when it really comes to looking at individual classroom and school-related data, meaning 3-level data, we run a little bit short of studies. They are examined quite rarely with each other. And so this is one of the points that I wanted to change, actually, when going on with that study. So what I expect is a connection between teacher communication climate, class climate, and bullying. We already know that there are these connections between class climate and bullying. This is what I called in that second point that I was talking about, that already investigated model. This is something that we know that there is a connection. And I was wondering what would happen if we would add a school-related factor, meaning that class, the communication climate thing, to this already investigated model. Because this is something that Brandenburg would put on the exosystem. It is something that the students don't really have to do anything to do with. It is nothing that they are involved in, because it is the way that the teachers behave with each other. And so I would expect additional effects when adding that school-related factor. And the second thing is that I would expect spillover effects. Spillover effects are, from a systemic point of view, because this is actually what they come from, known to happen in familiar context. What does that mean? That means we are talking about if a parent, for example, comes home and it was very busy working day and the parent is stressed and the parent is maybe a little bit annoyed, then the child doesn't have anything to do with the working relationship of the parent, but the fact that the parent, for example, is annoyed does affect the relationship between the child and the parent. This is what we mean by spillover effects. And if you take that thought, it's quite easy to come from that familiar context to school-related context, because children and teachers do spend a lot of time with each other. Maybe they don't want to, but they do have to. So they are important relationship people to each other. And so it might happen that we have spillover effects. And we could talk about something that I would call a direct spillover effect, meaning that the way that communication climate in the ecosystem between staff could affect the bullying outcome. But there would also be like a moderation effect, meaning that there might be a connection between individual factors and class-related factors, in this case between bullying and class climate. And that connection between these two levels might be moderated by the way that the communication climate at school is. So this is the idea behind that thing. To put it in a picture, it might look like this. This is taken from the idea of the Bronfenbrenner model. You would probably know this and you could recognize it. And what I have printed in bold is actually the things that I could investigate and that I can be talking about empirically. And the other things that are pushed in dashed lines and marked with dashed arrows are the things that we can discuss about, for example, but it is nothing that I could put because of the way that the data are structured, could, well, add empirically. And the arrows include the idea of the Bronfenbrenner model that there is a very close connection between that links, actually. Okay, so what do we have? We have data from a German bullying survey that we did, including more than 2,000 students. These students learn in 114 classes at 24 schools, and we have data of more than 550 teachers. And this is something also special about the study, that we can combine teacher and student data. And this is, of course, what you need when you want to answer a research question that I put on the table, actually. When we are talking about individual factors, we are talking about the experience as a bully or as a victim, measured with the revised obvious bully victim questionnaire, but the results that I'm going to present you are not concerning victimization, but concerning bullying perpetration, just because of the time frame. When we're talking about class-related factors, we're talking about class climate, and when we are talking about the school-related factors, we are talking about communication climate, which is obviously aggregated data from the teachers. So we know from some studies that it is not very good to just talk about that one bullying experience, but that it is very useful to separate it in different forms of bullying. And this is what also fit our data best. So we are talking about physical, verbal, and indirect bullying. The same holds true for class climate. We also have 3 factors there that we have to look at separately. So we have community, we have rivalry, and we have classroom disturbance. And actually, it means just the way that it is called. And we have 1 factor of communication climate. This is something like how satisfied the teachers are with the communication in staff in general, with the atmosphere of communication, with the relationship that they have to each other, and the atmosphere in staff and such things. And as control variables at the individual level, we have sex, coded 1 female and 0 male. We have the year in which the children are taught. We have classes 6 and 8 included in our study. And we have the school type that was at the school level, obviously, that was dummy-coded. And we are talking about grammar school, secondary school, and schools of special education. Okay. Yeah, and obviously it was done with multi-level modeling. If you do multi-level modeling, the thing that you have to do is to look at intra-class correlation. Because intra-class correlation do give you an idea of how much variance is shared at the particular level that you look at. And it is also important to keep that in mind, because if you talk about explaining like 99% of variance at one level, that's a really good thing, but you always have to keep the intra-class correlation in mind, because obviously, and this is not a special thing to our data, but this is common to bullying research, you probably know that. We have little variance shared at the class level and at the school level. But we do have some variance shared, and there is research saying that even if there is such a small amount of variance, you should keep that in mind, and you should notice it when doing your results, actually. And we have a higher interclass correlation for communication climate. We can only say that at school level. That's obvious because we ask all teachers at the school. All right, so what are the results then? In the first model that you see on the left side, you can actually see what I called the already investigated model. So we have sex at the individual level, we have the classroom, the class climate variables at the class related level, and we have school type at the school level, and nothing more yet. And what we can see is that there are gender differences. This is not very surprising. We know that, meaning that males do report bullying perpetration physically and verbally more than girls. You can see that on that negative, on that negative number, because one was coded female, as I told you before. We do not see a very close connection, actually we do not see any connection between bullying and class climate, which is a bit surprising, but it's true for our data. And we can see that there is a school type differences, meaning that there is more bullying, actually if you put it together in all three, physical, verbal, and indirect bullying, in schools of special education, and that's also something that we did here before. So the question is, what happens if we take communication climate to that? And if we add it, that's the second model, we can see that pretty much nothing changes. That's a sad thing to me. If I say pretty much nothing changes, it means that we stick to the effects that we have at an individual level, at the class-related level, and we do not have any effect with communication climate. So you might come to the conclusion that the communication climate in the teaching staff does not play any role for the bullying outcome. But we know that there is a difference in bullying for special education schools. There are differences in the school type, obviously. And we also know that there are differences concerning the school type in communication climate. This is nothing that I put on a slide, but you just have to believe me. Meaning that teachers in special education schools do report significantly better communication climate. Maybe because there are smaller schools, maybe because they have to cooperate more with each other, because they have different tasks in teaching. This is just a guess, but the statistical fact is there. So it is to be expected, or it might be that that connection between bullying and communication climate has got something to do with the school type that you look at. And so I've added the interaction effects between communication climate and school type at the school-related level, at level 3. And this is what I want to show you in a third model. Everything that was presented on the right side has now moved to the left side, so this is nothing new. This is the second model with communication climate that I was talking to you just before. And you can see that there are two more lines with the communication climate for grammar school and the communication climate at secondary school. So the reference category is schools of special education. And if we add this, we can see that there are the figures printed in bold. Finally, we got the effects that I was looking for. And if you want to look at these effects, you have to look at the main effect of communication climate, and you have to look at the interaction effects between the communication climate and the school type. That means you actually have to look at something like this. Let's take this this figure for the communication climate, and if you want to know how this effect of communication climate is, for example, in secondary school, you have to take this figure and add it to this, and you see that you come up pretty much with 0. What does that mean? That means the communication climate actually does not play a role in secondary school for verbal bullying, and the same is actually true for all other types of bullying that I was looking at. And that means that that effect of communication climate that we can see in this line is obviously, is obviously true for schools of special education. So we can say that there is a connection between bullying between pupils and communication climate at the staff level, only for special education schools. But there we do have that effect. And the other thing that I was wanting to talk about was that spillover effects. You do that actually with a random intercept and slope model. This is just what the model in multi-level analysis is called like. And you are talking about cross-level interactions. And we do have a cross-level interaction for the connection between physical bullying and rivalry. That means we do have a connection, meaning that the more rivalry there is in the classroom, the more physical bullying the students report. This is what you can see in that line. This is the regression line for that effect. This is not the biggest effect that we've ever seen in the world, but this is quite normal. The way is not that close. We are not talking about a very near effect. And that effect is only true for low communication climate. That means this is only true for schools in which teachers report that they are not satisfied with the communication with each other. And if you look at schools with a high communication climate, then that effect pretty much, is away. It's not there anymore. So we could say that in schools with a high communication climate between the teaching staff, might it might be possible for the teaching staff to kind of buffer that negative connection, or that we would interpret as negative also, between physical bullying and rivalry. All right, so summarizing that results up that I want to show you, we can say that adding communication climate between staff reveals some effects connected to bullying, especially and maybe also exclusively the calculations are not finished yet, especially in schools of special education. And this is something, this is something new actually, because we, as I said before, we are talking about a variable that the children, that the pupils are not, really involved in. So we do have individual class-related and school levels that are connected. This is not very surprising, but now we have some more empirical evidence for it. That's a good thing. And we can say that there are spillover effects that exist. We wouldn't be in research when we wouldn't have to come up with some limitations. We have a low variance of bullying at class level and school level. This is what I told you before with the inter-class correlation. So that effect that we have is a small effect. You have to keep that in mind. But this is kind of a practical implication problem that you have when you come up with such ecological ideas, because the fact that there is a small statistical effect does not necessarily mean that it is not any effect in practice. So it might be important to look at this, even if it is a small effect. And what we also do not know yet is how these mechanisms of spillover effects actually work. We don't know how it works that there is that connection, so we need further analysis. Okay, concluding, we can say that the results indicate that spillover effects exist between levels, obviously, and so staff characteristics at school level should be added in bullying analysis wherever possible. And you could even go a little bit further and say that if you want to work and do something against bullying, it is not only necessary to include the pupils and the classes, but it is also worth to working with the staff, even if they have the feeling that the variable that you are trying to work at has nothing to do with the bullying. You could expect that there is a connection to bullying. However, we need further statistical analysis, and for these further statistical analysis, we do need complex statistical data, we need big samples. But if we have that, we could contribute to the understanding of the mechanisms of the spillover effect and might contribute, to better evidence-based, maybe, investigations for the prevention and intervention of bullying. Thank you very much.